The HOA president tried to tow my boat off what she called our community lake, and a few months later, she watched her own SUV get dragged off the dock, under a court order with my name on it, and a judge telling her association to pay my attorney fees and stay off my water. And I swear to you, in that moment, I did not feel like some big hero. I just thought, Granddad, we finally got your lake back. And yeah, that happened. It still feels unreal when I say it out loud. Before I take you back to where this whole mess really started, do me a favor and drop your city and what time it is where you are in the comments. I like knowing who I'm talking to when I tell these stories, and if you like hearing about regular folks standing up to people who mistake a clipboard for a crown, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you do not miss the next one, because this ride got a lot bumpier than one angry letter on a cream envelope. My name is Jake Miller, and I live in a little cedar cabin at the end of a rutted dirt road a few miles outside a town called Hartley Ridge. The cabin is nothing fancy. Patched roof, old screen door that squeaks every time the wind thinks about moving, but the lake in front of it. Miller Lake, that is the closest thing my family has to a religion. My granddad bought that water back when there were more deer tracks than driveways. He left me the deed, the old survey maps, the riparian rights, and one rule he repeated so often it got into my bones. You take care of the lake, and the lake takes care of you. Most mornings before all this HOA nonsense, that is exactly what it felt like. I would sit on the porch rail with a chipped blue coffee mug, breathing in that smell. You only get around cold water and cedar. Watching mist lift like a blanket, kids in bright orange life vests shuffling nervously down the dock. Old guys in faded caps arguing about which lure was hot this week. A teenager paddling a beat-up canoe like he was going to cross the whole country. In it, nobody paid to be there. Nobody checked in. If you respected the place, you were welcome. And for a long time, I honestly thought that was enough to keep the peace. You know what I mean. Then they built Clearwater Bluffs up on the ridge one year. It was trees. The next year, it was gray houses with white trim and little stone mailboxes lined up like soldiers. And with those houses came a thick packet in my mailbox that said, "Welcome to the Clearwater Bluffs Homeowners Association," on fancy paper. Even though my cabin is not in their subdivision, not on their utilities. Nothing at that was the first time I saw the name Brenda Collins at the bottom of a letter, HOA President, written under it like a badge. Brenda is one of those people you can spot from 50 yards away. Perfect hair, big sunglasses, sharp blazer. The kind of walk that says she never met a sidewalk she did not think she owned. She took over the HOA like she had been practicing in the mirror. The first newsletters were cute enough, friendly reminders about trash cans and suggested porch light styles. Then came a whole page about how plastic flamingos disrupt visual harmony. I live on separate land down by the water. My address is technically County Road, not Clearwater. Anything, so the first time I saw that, I just snorted, tossed it in the wood stove, and poured another cup of coffee. I figured it was suburban drama that would never reach my shoreline. The first serious letter showed up on a Tuesday in one of those envelopes printed with the HOA logo, tried to sound official. Dear occupant, which already told me how much homework they had done. That letter said my boat, a 30-foot fiberglass cruiser called the Blue Heron, was visually incompatible with community standards and blocking shared access to the lake. Potential fine $50 payable to Clearwater Bluffs, HOA. I fed that one straight into the stove and went back to sanding a railing. Because if you cannot be bothered to put my name on something, you do not own my attention. The second letter used my name, spelled it right, and everything. The tone was a little sharper. The third listed my boat registration number, bumped the fine to $500, and added a line at the bottom that made my stomach tighten just a bit. Failure to comply may result in towing or removal of the non-compliant vessel at owner's expense. When that one I did not burn, I slid it into a folder where I keep my granddad's deed, the tax receipts, and that dry little paragraph that spells out my riparian rights. That piece of legalese basically says, the water in front of my cabin is on Miller land, not Clearwater Bluffs land. I pulled a cheap spiral notebook from the drawer and started writing things down. Dates, times. Who dropped off what exact phrases that made my ears ring, because I have seen enough in this life to know memory gets fuzzy right when paper starts getting sharp. I still thought it would stay on paper. I really did then. One Saturday morning, I am on the porch in flannel pants and boot smug, warming my hands, watching fog roll off the lake, when I hear that distinct beep of a truck backing up and the hard little click of heels on wood sounds that do not belong at my dock at 8:30 in the morning. I look down, and there it is, a tow truck backed right up as close as it can get. Bed-tilted chains hanging like they are about to grab something. A guy in coveralls standing by the controls, looking like he wishes he was anywhere else, and striding in front of him is Brenda, a clipboard. Under her arm, bright orange violation sticker already peeled halfway off the backing like it is itching to stick to something. She does not even glance at my porch, just points at the blue heron and says loud enough for everybody on the ridge to hear. There it is, oversized, non-compliant, blocking community vista and shared access. Mark, hook it up. The driver. Mark shifts his weight, gives me a quick look and says, "Ma'am, dispatch said this was a private dock," but Brenda just waves that away. The HOA has jurisdiction over the lakeshore. She snaps. The board voted hook it up, and she starts flipping through her papers like she is in a courtroom instead of standing on my boards. I walk down the path, heart thumping and jaw clenched, but trying to keep my voice level, because the quickest way to lose in these situations is to be the first one to yell. "Morning," I say. "Want to tell me why there is a tow truck on my property?" And she finally looks at me, slides her sunglasses down just enough to let me see that mix of annoyance and superiority. "Some people are born with Mr. Miller," she says. "You have ignored multiple notices. Your vessel violates Clearwater Bluffs Code 8B. We are enforcing removal today. You can retrieve it after you pay your outstanding fines." I look at Mark. "You got a court order in that truck, or just whatever she printed off her laptop?" He shrugs and says, "I got a work order with your address, and a picture of that boat, sir, that's it." So I turn back to Brenda and say, "Then nobody's touching that chain." And she lets out this little laugh, more air than humor. "We do not need a court order. The HOA manages the lake your dock sits in our view corridor, and I just stare at her because I have been around lakes all my life, and that is the first time I ever heard someone claim they own a view. The what? I ask, and she straightens up like she is teaching a class. The view corridor. "It is in our bylaws," she says, as if saying it slow will make it real. I hold out my hand. "You got anything from the county or the state that says Clearwater Bluffs owns this water or this dock?" She flips her binder pages of maps with highlighter, fine schedules, blurry photos of mailboxes, maybe a printout from their website, but nothing with a seal on it. And when people run out of real paperwork, they tend to reach for volume. So she marches right past me and slaps that orange sticker on the side of my boat so hard the hull thuds. "Their official notice," she says. "Mark, hook the chain." Mark starts towards the bow chain, dragging across the planks, and that scratching sound sends a chill straight up my spine. But before he gets there, I hear a different engine, a familiar one. I turn and see a white SUV with a light bar roll to a stop behind the tow truck. There is only one person in the county who drives that particular SUV. My brother Matt steps out uniform on coffee in his hand. He looks at the tow truck, at my boat, at the sticker at me. "Morning," he says, voice casual, but eyes already measuring everyone. "Someone want to explain why there is a tow truck parked on my brother's dock?" And Brenda lights up like she just found her ace. "Sheriff Miller, we are conducting a lawful HOA enforcement action. His vessel is out of compliance and obstructs community access." She says it like she is reading from a script. Matt glances at the no trespassing sign nailed to my tree, then at her binder. "Ma'am, you got any document from the county recorder or a judge that says you control this dock or this shoreline?" he asks. Still polite, but you can hear the steel under it. She waves the binder again. "We have bylaws and a vote from the board," she snaps. Like that settles it. And he nods slow, like he is explaining basic math. "Bylaws are not a deed, and they are not a court order," he says. "Right now, you are on private property without permission, unless you can show me something with a county seal or a judge's signature. I need you and that tow truck off this dock." Her cheeks go bright red because she knows he is right. But there are neighbors watching from their decks, some of them already holding their phones up, and some people would rather break their own nose than back down in front of a camera. She turns back to my boat, jams the sticker even harder into the fiberglass. The dock flexes under her weight, and that sticker just peels away from the hull in slow motion and lands perfectly on the back of her shiny black heel. A little orange flag of karma for half a second. Nobody breathes. Then somebody snorts. Then somebody laughs. Pretty soon, half the lake is cracking up even. Mark, the tow truck driver, looks like he is trying not to smile. Brenda spins around, heels clacking storms back up the ramp. With that sticker still stuck to her shoe, Mark shrugs at me, eases the truck back out. Matt squeezes my shoulder and says quietly, "Get your paperwork together." She is not done. He was right. That walk of shame should have been the end of it, but for people like Brenda, humiliation is just fuel. By that evening, the neighborhood Facebook page is full of long posts about false narratives and hostile behavior at the lakeshore. My inbox has a new email about escalating enforcement and legal options, and the next envelope from the HOA lists a total of $1,500 in fines, with the phrase "possible legal action" underlined twice. I could feel it shifting from annoying to dangerous, and it was not just about me anymore. Neighbors started stopping by my place with their own stories. A retired teacher who got fined for having a bench too close to the sidewalk, a single mom who got a letter about her kid's basketball hoop being aggressively visible. You could see the same thing in their faces, that tight mix of anger and fear, like they were afraid to push back, because envelopes do not argue, they just pile up. That is when I really leaned into the paperwork. I drove to the county recorder's office and asked the clerk for certified copies of everything tied to my parcelhood surveys. Riparian rights tax history. I took all that to a lawyer. I trust a woman named Dana Brooks. She spread the documents out on her desk, tapped the deed with her pen, and said, "Jake, this lake is yours, not just in your heart on paper. If they want to fight with bylaws, we answer with law." And something in me just unlocked, like I had been walking around with a weight on my chest, and suddenly realized there was a handle on it. We put together what we called the Miller Lake file. Every letter from the HOA, screenshots of Brenda's Facebook posts, photos of that sticker on her shoe statements from neighbors who felt pressured. I labeled a big manila folder, Lake Evidence, and every time another envelope showed up, I did not feel panic anymore. I felt another page going into that folder. Anger started cooling into something steadier, something closer to resolve. You know, the big twist actually came from a direction I did not expect. One evening, my phone rings, and it is a loan officer from a small bank in town. He clears his throat and says, "Mr. Miller, I noticed your family name on an old document connected to Clearwater Marina. I thought you might want to know the Homeowners Association is behind on their loan. There is a right of first refusal clause with the Miller family listed. If the note changes hands, you get first shot." I remember staring at the framed deed on my wall, at my granddad's handwriting in the margin next to a little paragraph I had never paid much attention to, and I thought, "Old man, you really did think of everything." With Dana's help, we set up a little company, Miller Lake Holdings. Nothing flashy, just a legal bucket to hold what my family had already built. We bought the marina, note fair and square, signed the stack of papers. Wired the money, got the assignments recorded, and suddenly on paper, the stage Brenda loved to stand on for HOA announcements. Clearwater. Marina that. Dock and the ramp and the parking lot all sat on debt. My company controlled. She was still up there bragging about our community marina, and I did not say a word. Sometimes, the best thing you can do with leverage is let it sit quietly until it is needed. Brenda found out something was up in a different way, because the next move she made was not another letter. It was a lawsuit one morning. A process server shows up on my porch with a packet thick enough to stop a bullet. Clearwater Bluffs Homeowners Association versus Jacob Miller. Accusations of unlawful possession of community waters, obstruction of shared access, harassment of HOA officials, all dressed up in legal language like that, would make it true. Donna read it once, smiled a little, and said, "All right. They wanted lawyers. Let's show them what that actually looks like." The day of the hearing, the Hartley Ridge Courthouse feels more like a high school football game. Every bench is packed, people I have only ever seen at the grocery store are crammed in. Shoulder to shoulder, a couple of them give me little nods. A few pat my arm. As I walk past, Brenda sits at the plaintiff's table in a dark gray suit. Jaw clenched, stack of papers in front of her like a fortress. Her lawyer looks like he learned the case on the drive over at our table. It is just me, Dana, and one box with the word evidence written on it in black marker. When Judge Ramirez walks in and calls the case, the room actually goes quiet enough that you can hear the hum of the lights. Brenda's lawyer starts strong lots of phrases about community standards and collective will, and how my boat encroaches on neighborhood harmony. The judge lets him go for maybe a minute. Then she holds up a hand and says, "Counselor, do you have any deed easement title or county recorded document showing your client owns or controls Mr. Miller's shoreline or the lake itself?" He stammers something about bylaws and plats and votes waves. A color map of the subdivision. She nods once and says, "I am not asking about bylaws. I am asking about legal ownership, and it is crystal clear to everyone in that room what the answer is." Then she turns to our table. "Mr. Miller," she says, and Donna stands. Wheels the box forward and starts laying things out one by one. "Your Honor, here is the original deed conveying Miller Lake to the Miller family. Here are the certified riparian rights and chain of title. Here are the tax records, And here is the recorded assignment of the Clearwater Marina mortgage note to my client's company, Miller Lake Holdings, LLC. You can actually feel the air in the room change as the judge flips through those pages. And that is right when Brenda does what she always does. When reality refuses to cooperate, she stands up and bursts out. This is not fair. Everyone knows that Lake is for the community. He is using old paperwork to steal what belongs to all of us. The sheriff is his brother. This whole thing is biased. Her voice is shaking, not with fear, but with that special kind of anger that comes from losing control. Judge Ramirez looks over her glasses and says, calm but firm, "Mrs. Collins, sit down. This is a courtroom, not a neighborhood Facebook group. Brenda keeps going, calling me selfish, saying I refuse to compromise, talking about my boat being an eyesore." The judge's jaw tightens just a little. "Mrs. Collins, if you do not sit down right now, I will hold you in contempt," she says, and Brenda finally drops into her chair, arms crossed, glaring at me like I personally moved the lake. The judge takes a breath, looks out over the room, and says the line that still rings in my ears when I close my eyes at night. The court finds that Miller Lake and the adjacent shoreline are privately owned by Han Miller, and that the Clearwater Bluffs Homeowners Association has no legal authority over his property or the water above it. This lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice. There is this tiny pause where everyone processes it. Then the room exhales in a wave. Shoulders drop, a couple of people nod. Somebody in the back whispers. Finally, Judge Ramirez is not done, though she continues. Furthermore, the HOA is ordered to pay Mr. Miller's reasonable attorney fees and costs associated with this action, and in light of the repeated attempts by the association to enforce non-existent authority over his property, this court recognizes Mr. Miller's right to restrict HOA-related activities on or around his land and the marina property now controlled by his company. Any further attempts to tow his boat, interfere with his dock, or claim enforcement power on that shoreline may be treated as trespass. That word, trespass, hangs in the air like a bell, because for months Brenda has thrown that word at everybody else now. It is officially pointed back at her. She pops up one more time, almost out of habit. "You cannot do this. You cannot just hand him our lake. You are all against me," she says, and the judge just nods at the bailiff. "Please escort Mrs. Collins out." And as Brenda is walked down the aisle, she throws one last line over her shoulder. "This is not over. Jake, you will regret this. All of you will." But the doors close behind her, and for the first time since that cream envelope hit my mailbox, her voice is just a muffled noise on the other side of a wall. I walk out of that courthouse with a certified copy of the order. In my hand, the same lake waiting outside, same trees, same old dock, but something in me is different. The fear that every letter dug into my shoulders is lighter, replaced by this steady, quiet sense that I finally did right by my granddad's promise, by the neighbors who were too tired or too scared to push back, by that kid in the canoe who asked me once if the HOA could make rules for water, and I told him, water remembers the law, remembers too if you write it down and keep it safe. Now here is the part that always starts a fight in the comments, and I am honestly curious what side you land on. Some folks hear this story and say, I went too far, that I should have just moved the boat or paid a fine to keep the peace. Others say I did not go far enough, that I should charge the HOA to even look at the lake, now that I should have turned it into a private club just to prove a point me. I think I did what my granddad was trying to teach me all along. Stand your ground without screaming. Protect what you have been trusted with. Use patience and paper instead of fists and gossip. But I am just one guy who got tired of being pushed around by letters with no legal backbone. You might see it completely differently. So let me ask you this. If you had a Brenda in your neighborhood, someone who thinks a title and a clipboard means they own everything they can see from their porch, how far would you go to push back? What point does keeping the peace turn into letting yourself be bullied? And have you ever stood up to an HOA, a boss, a neighbor, or even a family member who tried to stretch their little bit of power over your life? I really want to hear your take. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me if you think I was right, wrong, or stuck somewhere in the messy middle, and if you like hearing real stories about regular people taking their power back. One piece of paper at a time. Hit subscribe, and stick around, because as long as there are folks who confuse authority with ownership, there will be more stories to tell, and I promise you this much. Lakes remember, and so do the people who live on them.